Maze Jackson, Joe Walsh are hosts of Uncomfortable Conversations, and they've taken their town hall style talks to a podcast. They join us this morning. Good morning. We just had an uncomfortable conversation.
Talk about uncomfortable. I don't know if we can live up to it.
I'm still blushing.
So you know Maze does mornings on WVON, and Joe, you do afternoons on AM 560. So how did you guys have your own shows on different radio stations. How did you come together for this podcast?
Well, you know what, it started with, we both have very difficult conversations. Joe Walsh, being the founder of the Tea Party, I consider myself one of the most vociferous advocates for black self-interest. We got together to do a show, and when to do a radio show, and the response was so overwhelming from both our listening audiences that we actually shut down iHeart. And so we said, hey, here's an awesome opportunity for us to partner and really jump into this podcast movement.
Most of my audience, I got white people talking to white people. Maze has got black people talking to black people. And we don't talk to each other about these issues because it does make us uncomfortable to talk about racism. Is there really racism?
Yeah, and I haven't heard the podcast, but I'm going to guess if it's been successful that you guys are not talking all over each other and trying to scream on top of each other.
No, that's I'm a reasonable, conservative white man, crazy black man, so we get along well.
Yeah, you know, we don't scream over each other, and I think that's the whole point, is the dialogue and the communication. So many times we have gone into silos, and these guys will scream over here, Joe's a Tea Party guy, and so we write this story without ever talking. And so this is an opportunity for people to have rational conversations about things that make everybody uncomfortable, but really need to be talked about.
Right.
What's your most uncomfortable conversation that you guys have had or that we'll experience in the first week?
Maze believes that black people cannot be racist.
We can't be racist.
Hold on. But when he says that in front of a group of white people, they're like crazy. They don't understand how that could be. That led to a very uncomfortable conversation.
I would say that, and the other conversation is the conversation about the police officers. When I said that as a black man, if I saw a police officer in distress, I would not get involved. I would not assist the police officer, only because I would be concerned that I would wind up a victim as well. Joe didn't believe me, and then we had the incident that happened in Midlothian where the gentleman was killed, and he was an actual security guard.
But white people and black people have such different concepts of the police, naturally. That's always uncomfortable.
Let's look at the issue from the other day where a congressman, I'm going to paraphrase here for the sake of time, had a black woman stand behind him and said, well, President Trump can't be racist because this black woman knows him and she thinks he's a good guy.
That was just silly.
He said the Michael Cohen.
I think that
so
was
did you both agree on that issue?
Well, I don't know. We haven't talked about that one. That was Congressman Mark Meadows. To me, it just looked silly.
I thought it looked crazy as well. I thought that, you know, just because you hire someone, I mean, they hired housekeepers back in the day as well. So I didn't think that, I thought that was kind of crazy to suggest that because Donald Trump or President Trump hired this woman, this one woman, beyond everything else that he said and everything else that he's done, absolves him from any issues of racism.
But the issue of Trump itself is an uncomfortable one. Black people and white people, again, have different concepts of what he is, perceptions.
Well, listen to what he. Well, if you believe Cohen, he said drove through a black neighborhood and said only black people would live like this, and they're stupid. What is there a defense for that? I mean,
oh God, no.
Okay.
No, God, no.
So I've been trying to figure out where you're going, Joe, with some of this, but it seems like you agree.
Well, I'm going to say that, but there are things that are happening in the black community that you don't see anywhere else that are, whether it's issues of poverty, crime, etc., that have to be addressed. And so I think that when we looked at what President Trump said, what he said was probably crazy, but I think if you talk to a lot of black people, they'll say, why does our neighborhood look so different? Why is there a tale of 2 cities or 3 cities in a place like Chicago? And so we get into those nuances and dynamics of the conversation.
Chicago is still such a divided city, a segregated city. We got to do something about that.
Is this working because you feel like each of you respect the other? Because is this where this is not, you know, has it not worked in the past because whoever you've talked to has not respected the other person's opinion?
That's a great point. Hasn't respected and hasn't listened. We're different politically, and he is black and I am white. And we do. Once we got over the perception of Joe Walsh and Maze Jackson, we've gotten to know each other.
I think that is definitely the case. I also think that people, we go into our silos, and so oftentimes it's the language. And so people would say, Joe, the first time we talked, Joe was like, the blacks, the blacks, the blacks. And I was like, Joe, are you interested in having a real dialogue? Because if you're interested in having a real dialogue, then you really need to change that. Say black people.
Language.
Joe changed it to black people, and the dialogue changed, and that was where we saw, hey, maybe we can talk, maybe we can get. Now, we don't agree with everything that each other says, but really starting to break down some of these nuances in language to see if there is a true opportunity to understand
We
each
got
other.
to get white people and black people talking to each other. That's the whole point of this.
It's interesting, and it sounds like it's going to be a great show. It's Uncomfortable Conversations, and that's uncomfortableconversations.com is where you find it?
Uncomfortable-conversations.com. I think the topic of the first podcast is going to be keto crotch. We're very
Well, I think that's something we can all agree on.
Problem.
Universally uncomfortable. And Maze is mornings on WVON 1690 AM, and Joe is afternoons on AM 560, The Answer, 5 to 7. Thanks, guys. Good to see you.
Thanks for having us.